This is the channel for the woman who's done playing small, the woman who knows there's a fire in her belly, a voice in her bones, and a destiny she's done apologizing for. If you're ready to unleash the woman you were born to be, hit subscribe and join the movement. I'm Leona Schrock, and let's rise together.
It was on a cold, wintry night that my soul suddenly awakened, and I tiptoed across my closet, grabbed my suitcase, so silently packed my bags in the deep despair that nobody hears me. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I know this is literally how a lot of people's stories go when they leave the Amish. And I said all of that to say this that everybody has their own unique story. And I've always hesitated sharing my Amish life, part of my story, just because it opens a whole basket of worms. There's so many questions, and everybody has their own story. And yes, there is a lot to the culture. However, I am here. I'm going to share my story because I know that there is something that I stand on firmly, and I want you to grab this, run with it, and integrate it in your life because I am an identity alchemist coach. I help women transform their life, recovering from, well, not recovering, completely healing from religious trauma. And I know that it does not matter where you've been in your life, what you've gone through, where you are at. You have the ability to completely transform and change your life. You are always co creating your life with God, and here is something that you can step into your power and truly embody. And I know, like, we get in our own way, we have these stories, we have these things, but I'm like, if I can, so can you, if, keynote, if you are willing to do the work. So it has taken me years and years and years of doing work, and I'm still not finished. I'm still working, and I always will be for the rest of my life. But it's not coming from a place of, oh, I need to fix myself. It's coming from a place of limitlessness. Yes, that was a big word this morning, where I know that I have only scratched the surface of what's possible. But let's get into it of my Amish upbringing and what it was like, and kind of give you a glimpse because I know it's brought a lot of curiosity when I was saying this of what it was like for me to grow up Amish and how I've, like, I'm not going to get into it all of how I completely transformed my life, but you're going to have like Netflix series episode one in a Cliff Notes version that I'm going to share with you. So there was a lot of things that was very, very different about my upbringing. And one of the cool parts of my like story growing up, and my dad would be like, "No, Leona, you don't need to share that part of the story." I have always been the child that clearly does not listen. So my parents were both born and raised Amish, and my dad was drafted for war, and it, if you know, in the Amish culture, they don't go to fight. But my dad did serve in the, which, side note, totally not in agreement. That was a whole fight that went down when I left the Amish. Because see, when I left, I didn't escape and leave quietly. When I left, like, I was confronting with the preachers. However, going back to all that being said, my dad ended up serving at a hospital. He was born and raised in Illinois. My mom was born and raised in Ohio. And he went down to Florida to serve in the hospital. And what he did was work outside the morgue and he cleaned the tools. I'm like, wow, Dad, dark. Anyways, my mom, on the other hand, had become a member of the Amish church, was not, she kind of felt like she got pressured into it. So she's like, I need something different. She was a nanny. She went down to Florida and she nannied and she had a house cleaning business. Both my mom and dad, when they lived in Florida, were not Amish. And this was something that I wasn't allowed to know for years and years. I did not know this until I was like 16 or 17 because my dad did not want anybody to know. Like, he was literally driving a car because in that culture, your past is shameful. Like, you don't talk about it. You repented, you moved on, you don't talk about it. And so there was times when we were with a taxi and there was vehicle issues that my dad would have known how to fix because he knew how to work on vehicles, but never said a word because he didn't want that part of his story to come out, which is really sad because it's a part of who he is and what has made him into the man that he is today, despite the fact that religion has conditioned him and controlled him. That's another story. So my mom was down there. They met in Florida, obviously started dating and decided because of fear infused, right? The families wanted them to come back home. They were going to this church, and the minister was like, whatever you guys do, because my dad was had started going to a Mennonite church. I think he may have kind of been attending that church on and off. And so he told him, he's like, whatever you do, like you guys make a decision and stay with that church because God forbid, don't jump churches back and forth. So one of the biggest things in the Amish culture is everything is fear infused. Like you are taught about God. I grew up in a home where I learned about Jesus. It was just everything is infused through fear, which obviously it has to be because if you're going to have man-made rules, how are you going to control people? So my parents packed their bags, left Florida. Sigh. Like what would make one do that? And moved back, and they got married and lived in Illinois for the first few years. My brother was born. He is 6 years older than me, and my mom hated, hated Illinois. It's farm country. It's flat. Everybody lives worlds apart. And so my dad was had an excavating business, and he shut it down. They moved to Ohio, and they built a house here where I was born and raised. And he ended up giving up his dream and went into a factory and worked there the rest of his life. And so to say that, I have one brother who's 6 years older, obviously, no sisters. Everybody is always in shock when I say that we come from such a small family. That is something that I give my dad a lot of credit for. My mom had health issues. And so after she's like, I have a boy and I have a girl. So what is the, like, I don't think we should have anymore. And my dad was in complete agreement. So I will always respect my dad in that manner for doing that. So skipping forward, most kids, like it is rare that you go to public schools from kindergarten through eighth grade. Now, this is the question that I get all the time that I'm going to ask really quickly is where did it come from that they quit at eighth grade? Well, what happened was years and years ago, there was farms, right? There was farms and they needed help at home. So it was the kids went to school from kindergarten to eighth grade or first grade to eighth grade. And they got the whatever they wrote up had an agreement from the government that they can pull their kids out to start working at home and help on the family farm to help with the family and help raise income at home because obviously they can't be doctors or lawyers anyways because they can't be a part of the world is where that rule comes from. I, on the other hand, did not go to Amish school. Never, not a stitch, not a day in my life did I go to Amish school. I went to public school my whole life. When I was going to public school, I always was questioning like why do the Amish do it was this crazy thing and I always say like I know that obviously I was born into the Amish community but I wasn't actually truly like my soul already knew this was not where I was going to stay because I was questioning things constantly. My aunt joked when my mom passed away at the funeral she's like you exhausted us with the questions that you would ask over and over and over and like she's like the questions that you would come up with there was times where we couldn't even answer you. Hello, have we met? Like, I'm the rebel. I am not to be contained. I will not just follow rules because I am told to follow the rules. And so, with that being said, obviously, you're also told a lot in the Amish community that things are just the way that they are because they don't actually know why they are the way that they are, which is what I went into when I left. And so, when I left eighth grade, I felt like my life had ended. I remember sitting on the back, I had begged my parents please let me go on because I had all my friends. And I remember when I was in sixth grade, my parents had talked about putting me in Amish school for seventh and eighth grade so I could learn German. So in the Amish church, they a lot of how they teach is in German. It's not all, it's also in the Pennsylvania Dutch language. However, I begged. I was like, please, please, please. It was like one of the rare times that I used my voice because in the household that I grew up in was very chaotic. So going back a little bit, it was between 9 and 10. My mom had polio as a child, and then when she had like she was healthy for the most part, and then she had broken her leg and they gave her the wrong pain medications and she reacted. And from that point on, because her nerves were at a point anyways where they were kind of weak, it just took her mental health and basically like tipped it over. And I have very little memory of what my mom was like emotionally prior to that. And my brother and I have like, even had conversations, and he's like, I've come to understand that you really don't know who mom was at the core before all of this happened. So I went from being a little girl who was playing and doing the things to overnight, because my mom ended up in the hospital because of the broken leg. It was around Christmas time and they had to do surgery and they ended up keeping her longer because she kept reacting to the medications. And my grandma and my grandparents lived right next door. And so I had an aunt who wasn't married, and then I had an aunt who um, was married but had no kids. They had come from out of town to stay in. It was Christmas time, so I stayed there for a little bit. And now I have three women, telling me what to do, what not to do, what to wear, what not to wear. And I remember there was some arguments about how I went to school because I was like, you guys aren't going to tell me how to. There was this day where the bus was coming and I loved school. School was my life. Now, I didn't love sitting in school and doing my work. I just love the social aspect of it. I was a social butterfly. I still am to this day. And I was running behind and the bus was coming and I had like a black sock and a blue sock on. And it's so funny how your childlike brain works. And I was ready to run out to the bus. And my aunt was like, you can't go to school like that. You have two mixed match socks. And I was like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I'm going to miss the bus. She's like, you have to change your socks. They have to match. And all the while I was like, I just want my mom. I just want my mom. Like I said, I was like 9.5, 10 years old. And she made me like changed my socks and I almost missed the bus. Had nightmares for years that I was going to miss the bus, like such a dramatic and traumatic event. And it was just like one of those things where I remember that moment where it's like, I just want my mom. And I never got my mom back emotionally from that point on. I became an adult overnight because when my mom came home from the hospital, it was suddenly went from my mom running the household to where is my mom going to be at emotionally and mentally? Is she going to be happy? Is she going to be sad? I remember I used to get off the bus, walk into the drive, like walk down the driveway to the house, thinking, what kind of mood is my mom going to be in today? Is she going to be happy? Is she going to be sad? Is she going to be saying, I don't want to eat? Are we going to have to take her to the hospital? Now, it wasn't like my mom couldn't communicate. She did. It was just she would have reactions to medications, and then there was times where we would actually have to take her in, admit her. There was a time where I remember because we didn't have phones at our house, so it was like every few neighbors they were allowed to have a phone, and I had to go down to the neighbors and call my dad because he was at work and tell him like, Mom does not want to live anymore, and she's not eating. Like we actually have to take her in because here my dad was coping with the loss of grieving of who my mom was and who she is now. So his coping mechanism was to work. And sometimes I had to bring him back to reality. So I was managing the household emotionally, mentally, and then physically my mom's health had declined. So I had to take care of a lot more things. She would navigate through on how to do a lot of things. And I remember I would do the stuff and there was things that obviously she could do. It wasn't like she was bedridden, but I like had my chore list went like tripled. Suddenly, bam, I was doing a lot of things. And then I was really fast at it. And she was like, you didn't do that right. Go do it correctly. Da, 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 da. And that was just something that I was really good at as a child was getting shit done. Still to this day, that's one of my um, superpowers is I can get shit done. I can also procrastinate. However, getting back to all of that to be said, I remember my parents did okay. They were like, okay, you can go continue to go to seventh and eighth grade because they knew enough that I was going to be bored. Now, part of the reason that my family did send me to public school was one, the social skills that it creates, two, understanding the history of the world, and being educated. Like my family actually wanted me to be educated. Obviously, not become a doctor, nurse, lawyer, attorney, or anything like that. They wanted me to know about life. And not that you don't learn that in Amish school, but it's very different when you're going in there. So I left when school was done. I felt like my world fell apart. I wanted to go on to high school, and I started I started a cleaning company, and I started working at a restaurant. At the grand age of 19 and a half, I got married, and at a year later, I had my firstborn child, my son, who made me a mama. And then 2.5 years later, I had my daughter. And then 3.5 years later, almost four, I had my youngest one, Julia. And so Matt, Amy, and Julia. And love being a mom. Being a mom. I have, you know how some people are like, I know I was born to be a mom, and other people it's like, I know without a shadow of a doubt I was born to be a mom. I love being a mama, and that is why I'm so fierce about helping other women walk through and heal from religious trauma. Because when we heal from our trauma, when we heal from our generational and break those generational curses, we shift and change the whole bloodline. So with that, I was married for, we were married for, okay, so I left 14 years ago. I left when I was 30. So we were married for almost 10 years. And a little bit prior to that time, now I know I've like skipped a lot of parts and pieces of this, but in this to say, of course, I was still questioning everything. I got in trouble with the church a lot. It was because I made our clothes. And so it was, my sewing was too fancy. The colors that I chose was too fancy. The way that I decorated our house was too fancy. I was the one that was wedding planner. I helped with the weddings. I did everything. I entertained. I would have people over. Like when I was when I left like when I got married, and I did not get married to the love of my life. I should probably give a clip of that, of what that was like, because it is a big part of my story. But when I got married, I went all in. Like I was what you would say the perfect Amish woman, because I would have dinners and I would invite people over and I would cook really good, and my house was decorated so beautifully, which also got me in trouble. And my kids had like matching clothes, which also got me in trouble because it was too fancy. Because clearly I can't stay within the lines. No matter what I do, that's just not who I am. But going back to when I met my ex, we were in the same church, and then we went into what you call the Rumspringa era, right? You party. And him and I were really good friends. And I was still in the mental war space of, I really don't want to be Amish. It feels like a death sentence to me. There has to be more for me in my life. There has to be something greater. There has to be something bigger. And every time I would question it to anybody, I got like, I don't even remember what answers I got, but it was answers that shut me down. And I finally came to this point where I thought, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm just losing my mind. And I probably should just, settle down and like go all in on this Amish life. This is just what it's like to have these questions, and I'm going to have to deal with it. And so I started dating my ex-husband, and I remember it was a week and a half, I would say, before we got married. So we were together. I tried to break up with him, and he was like, no, 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 no. We can work this out. And I'm like, something doesn't feel right. I don't think we should continue. And he's like, I'll do whatever it takes to make it work. Now let's tap this back into my childhood. And so he's like, I can't go on without you. I just want to be with you. You're the one. And like went all in his emotions. Well, that triggered the me that was responsible in the home of taking care of my family. Oh, I can't walk away, because if I do, if something bad happens, it's going to be my fault. So I ended up staying with him, and we ended up obviously getting married a week and a half before. I remember the exact moment. I was standing in the kitchen. The sun was shining through the kitchen window. My mom was sitting in a chair to my left. She was reading a book, and I don't know where my ex was at the time. And I had this moment in my heart where I was so sad. And I was like, I don't want to marry this man. I'm not in love with him. And I remember thinking, what if I just tell my mom right now that I don't want to marry him? And I thought, but what if she loses her crap? What if I cause her to have a mental breakdown? Because she had already told me in the Amish community, you have weddings at your own house. And she already told me, like, you're stressing me out to have this wedding. Like, this is a lot of work. She didn't want to have it at the house. We ended up having it at the house. And I remember thinking, I can't send her into like mental despair. And then what if the whole community knows that it's my fault that she had like a mental breakdown? And I remember like swallowing really hard and shutting everything down in my heart and saying, Leona, get it together. And I was like, suck it up. You're going to do this and you're going to go all in and you're going to make the best of it. And it was the moment that, looking back, that I betrayed and abandoned myself to please others because you're conditioned, right? I had the culture and then I had the upbringing of it. And it wasn't even that my family liked my ex that much. That was all the programming that was in me because going back, it probably wouldn't have sent my mom in a mental despair, but it was what I believed at that time. So we got married and had our three kids, and down the road, things began to derail. Ha, fun fact. Who would have thought, right? So it got to the point where I went into such a dark depression that I developed an eating disorder. I weighed 35 pounds less than what weigh today. My mom came to me and is like, what is going on? You are skin and bones. My anxiety was over the top. I had panic attacks. It was to the point where I was praying to not live anymore, but I would lay my kids down at night or put them down for a nap and look in their faces, and the tears would just roll down my cheeks because I would be like, I have to fight for these kids. I have to fight for these kids. I was like, Larry, you got to do this. You got to. And I was like, but I can't do this anymore. I can't be in this. I don't understand the church. I don't understand I don't understand the rules and I don't understand the fact that I never feel like I'm going to be good enough. I'm never going to make it. No matter what I do, it's not good enough. And I had this loop that just kept going and going and going in my brain. And I was like, I don't want to bring my kids up in this. I feel miserable in my marriage. Their dad and I were fighting all the time. And I had a girlfriend, like nobody knew. That was the other thing. Nobody knew what was going on, but they could see what was going on. Because clearly, if somebody continues to lose weight, I've always been skinny, but losing weight to this extent, we all are going to know something's going on. And I had a girlfriend come to me and she said, that could you please, please, please go get counseling? She's like, I'm begging of you, try this. And I said, this has to work. I remember the exact spot I was in. I said, this has to work because if it doesn't, I'm going to take my own life. I can't do this anymore. It was the teaching of the church, then it was the fights with my ex, and then it was just the chaos and the confusion. There was no light at the end of the tunnel for where I was, which was my soul screaming. I felt so isolated. I felt so judged. I felt guilt. I felt shame because then I felt guilt and shame for even being like, I don't want to be in this. I want to be out of this. And then it was like, oh my gosh, what is my family going to say if I leave? And but if I stay, then my kids are gonna, it was this whole chaos, like just swarming, the double-mindedness. I went to count my very first counseling appointment. Nobody, not even my ex, knew that I went. Nobody knew. And I went every Monday and began to discover the truth. And in the meantime, my ex comes to me and he's like, I don't want to be Amish. And I said, I don't care what you want or don't want. Figure it out. I don't need you to be Amish. I am on my journey. We were obviously still together at the time. And he's like, wait, you don't think I have to be Amish to be with you? And I'm like, no, like if you don't want to, I would much rather you're not Amish because at that point, he had gotten emotionally abusive because he was angry. He was confused. He was desperately seeking something and didn't know what he was seeking. And he was in the crossfire of like the religion and what is the truth. And so I was like, I don't care what needs to happen. I'm just not going to continue to do this. And I'm not going to continue to be in this like emotionally abusive circumstance and situation. he ended up going to a church, and what you could say transformed his life there. And he ended up leaving then the Amish, and we were still married. I still continued to go to the Amish church, but now the radar was even higher. So remember, I always was getting in trouble anyways, but now I excel because now I am living with a man who is no longer Amish, but I'm Amish. I have my kids and I'm seeking the truth. So there's a book, 1001 Questions about the Amish, and I'm the type that I am a Scorpio. Two, I will find shit out. So I have to have a whole case study of why I'm going to do something. I'm not just going to do it because I want to do this. So there's a book, 1001 Questions. I took that book every morning at 4 o'clock and I sat down with the Bible and I would compare and I would see. And I began to put the bits and pieces together of how the Amish culture even got put together and what is the truth of the Bible. Then it came to a screeching halt where I was like, okay, I knew that I was going to leave. And in the Amish community, you have the bishop, you have preachers, and you have a deacon. And my dad was the deacon. So it kind of magnified things because I'm also the deacon's daughter. And now he's also typically it's the deacon that goes and visits people, but he wasn't always the one because I was his daughter. There was times where others, like the preachers or the bishop, came to have a conversation. So now I'm being confronted. They had already had their conversations with him when he had left. Now I was the last hope, right? I was like, I was on the radar for being in trouble, but I was also on the radar because I was, when I was in the Amish community, everybody looked up to me. Because, like I said, I knew how to do a lot of things and I was really fucking good at what I did too. So there was a high level of respect for me. So there was a war going on of like, you are an incredible woman and don't you dare leave. And don't you fall trap to your husband's shenanigans at the time. And so my dad came to me and he was like, you were seen driving with your husband and that is not okay and we're going to have to ask you to put a stop to that. And I was like, so you're saying that it's okay for me to go with a taxi driver, but it's not okay for me to drive with my husband? Make that make sense. And he's like, well, that's just the way that it's always been, because if you drive with him, then the next thing we know that you're going to be, wanting to leave. And I'm like, so I'm living with him, I'm eating with him, I'm sleeping with him, but I can't drive with him. How does this make sense? And he was like, well, we can't tell you to not eat with him or sleep with him or be with him, but like driving, now you guys are going to be going places, and the next thing we know that you're going to be living the life that he is. And I'm like, okay, so help me understand this correctly again. I can hire a taxi driver and go to the very same places he is going, drive with another man, okay, and go do those things and not drive with the man that I'm married to right now. And that's okay. And so when I was like, no, it dwindled down to this is the way that it's always been. And so I had many, many conversations. I had many times that the preachers came over. I had many times the deacons came over because the way that I handle the confrontations, I will not fight you Bible to Bible. I will ask you questions because this is culture to Bible. This is not Bible to Bible. This is man-made rules to the Bible. But you guys go because anybody, regardless of what religion you come from, can go in the Bible and can make it whatever you want to make it. So fighting the Bible with the Bible is never going to get you where you want to be. And so they would come and I would just ask them questions. For example, one of the things that they had said to me, so you're going to leave and we have to excommunicate you from the church. You promised when you were baptized that you were going to stay committed to the Amish church. And I said, and explain to me why you guys put it in that when we get baptized that we promise to stay to the Amish church. Because the only way for us to get baptized is to be a member of the Amish church. So explain to me where in the Bible it does say that. Tell me. And they're like, well, that's the way that we've had this where you had it because that's the way that you control people. So that's not what I said to them. I said, okay, so you combined these two. This is the tradition of the Amish church, right? And now you're telling me that I can't be forgiven because I promised to stay Amish when I was baptized, which is a rule that you guys put in place, right? And you're saying I can't be forgiven, yet it does say that I can be forgiven in the Bible. So can you explain who decided that I can't be forgiven when ultimately any sin is forgivable? And you're saying that that sin, the rule that you guys made, is unforgivable. He was like, well, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. Yeah, you're going to have to get back to me on that because I don't need an answer. I already know the truth and you know the truth. So that was how my conversations went because it was never for me to prove myself right and prove them wrong. It was to activate and awaken within inside of them that what are we doing with the rule? Like, why are we living out of these rules? Like the you guys are living from rules, not from the Bible. But it also wasn't, I wasn't up for this as a debate if I'm going to leave or not. I knew in my mind, in my soul, that I was leaving. Just because you leave then does not mean that you have left emotionally, physically, and mentally. And this is what I want to say, and this is why I'm so passionate of what I do. I have been deconstructing for, yes, I left 14 years ago. And when I left, it was one of the best decisions that I ever made. But when I left physically, right? And I left somewhat emotionally, but I was still programmed the way that they teach through fear. Like it is literally indoctrinated in you. It is in your cells. It is in your neural pathways, everything. It takes, so I left 14 years ago and I left 14 years ago. It's 6 years ago that I got a divorce, 6 or 7. Earlier this year, I was saying it was 7. I don't even know. It's 6 or 7. I would have to look at the dates, but it was around Christmas time. Um, but it wasn't until because the thing that happened there was, and that's a whole nother story, and that's a whole nother chapter of my life that I'll share in one of my episodes, is that I was married to somebody who didn't want to continue to grow. I was married to somebody that was still stuck in religion on the inside. And I see this all the time. And that's why I've spent the last 7 years of my life, because it was before my marriage ended that I began to deconstruct deeply of what religion has done and the way that I have been programmed. And I'm still deconstructing some of it. And I see it show up in people. I can almost immediately see if somebody has religious background programming, because it shows up in these subconscious ways that you're not even fully aware that it's showing up in. And if one of the places, I'm going to end this video with saying this, uh, and then stay tuned for the next video, because not really haven't fully decided what I'm going to talk about, but we're going to be here and we're going to talk about it because we're going to transform and we're going to change your life, because you are way too powerful to stay where you are. You are made to do big things. And that's one thing that I knew, is that when you deconstruct from that religious programming, you become unstoppable and you create a life that you love and you co-create a life with God. And yes, you are going to be scared AF at times. That's okay, that's good. Is if you find that you shrink yourself still a lot, if you find that you go to speak up, but you're like, "Ugh," and you like conform, or if you find that you have this vision or you have this dream and you know that there's something bigger for you, even if you are no longer in religion, or you find that there's a gap, like there feels like there's a disconnect on the inside of you, where you can you understand everything that's going on the inside of you or around you, and you stay with inside of yourself and you stay stuck with inside of your soul, even though your soul is screaming for something bigger, even though your soul is screaming for something greater, then you are most likely still coming from religious programming, because it goes so deep. And I had this conversation with one of my clients this week where I got asked, how do I know that there's still religious programming happening on the inside of me? And I said, by the language that you're speaking, I can hear it, because that's one of my gifts. Is I would say people tell on themselves. I hear what most people don't hear, because I'm here to unlock your subconscious programming and unleash your religious trauma. So the woman that God has designed you to be can come out, evolve, and play, and do all the unchained and untamed things and be completely unstoppable. So until next time. I want you to challenge yourself of anytime you feel yourself shrinking, of how you can feel safe to start showing up powerfully.